Museum. I'm Mark Marquette. We're so glad you're with us today to Stay Curious with Mr. Nick Thomas. How are you, Mr.
Very
Thomas?
good. Thank you, Mark.
Nick, for 35 years, has been the curating, talking, whatever he needs to do. Today, he's the chief educator at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. How are things going out there?
Very good.
Everyone's back in school.
Yeah, and we've actually had some big crowds here recently. Since we got into the post-school capsule there, we were showing about 1,200, 1,300 people a day, which is not very much. But over the past, what was it, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we were doing upwards of 2,000 people. So we got a little surge going on there. But
nothing like the 5,000 that were peaking
nothing
out
like
there
the 5
this
and
summer.
8,000 that we had during the summer, but still some pretty healthy numbers that we enjoyed.
All right, we're just on our microphone here in our Stay Curious studios in downtown Titusville. We're always happy to have Nick on. Nick, you've been coming on for a year now for our program, and we're highlighting the shuttles of the month of May sometimes. He's talking about astronauts he knows. We're going to look at some of the shuttles of the month of May and talk about Gemini 11 here, but I did want y'all to know that Nick, we love it that you embraced our museum. We call him the astronaut Wrangler out there. You've literally introduced, I'd say, a couple hundred astronauts by now.
Probably.
And with all the amazing stories they have to tell out there. And but he is a recipient of the Harry Holcomb News and Communications Award, which is a great achievement that the National Space Club gives out. And he's a Snoopy Award recipient in his 35. I guess you're about in your 37th year working out there in some form or another. And we're truly blessed that we have you, Nick, on Stay Curious. We get a lot of people watching. And Marty is particularly, like me, always fascinated just with the stories we tell when we're around having a cup of coffee or something. And you're going to hear those stories from Nick Thomas here. And I understand that you had a special visitor out there last month. Want to just give one simple plug. We do have a memorabilia space auction Saturday, October 7th, online only. We have Woody Springs collection on there.
That's very good.
Thanks to your liaisoning these astronauts to us once in a while. Woody's got these Robin's flown medallions. If you want to own something, these are the rarest flown medallions. They're only issued to the astronauts in silver and gold. The silver ones are going for $300, $400, $500. There's a gold one going for about $3,000 to $5,000. And so many relics from the Apollo era on there, including the first Snoopy Award given to Mr. Kingsley, a test pilot for Grumman, on there. And so all kinds of things going on at this auction. Go there, hit the QR code, or go to our website to find it out there. So, Nick, you had a special visitor out there.
Yeah, we sure did. John McBride, who you see there to my right in this photograph. John was, of course, one of the 35 new guys, a class of 1978. He flew as a pilot on STS-41G, and for many years he was what I'll say is our chief astronaut out at Astronaut Encounter, and he set up the schedules and liaisons and so forth. And just recently, we had John come by, and he was awarded a Veterans Honorary Quilt. Now, this is an organization in Washington, D.C. that awards these quilts to deserving veterans. Recently, they awarded one to Admiral Colin Kilrain, Susan Kilrain's husband.
Okay.
And then Roger Crouch and his wife came down, and Anne is a member of this organization. And she made the arrangements to present one to Big John. And what you see here is from your left to right is astronaut Ken Cameron, followed by Big John and myself, and then astronaut Roger Crouch, who is now on stage here at the KSC Visitors Complex. He's our astronaut of the day. And it was good seeing Big John and having a chance to relive some memories and tell some stories. Couple of stories about his test pilot class, and I'll go into that another time. But it was a good time to link up with him and say hey, and for me personally, a chance to thank him for everything he made possible for me, particularly in the way of the Silver Snoopy Award. So it was good having Big John on board, and he's doing well.
He was the tallest of the astronauts for a long time. Tell
Yeah.
him he's very proud of where he was born.
Beckley, West Virginia,
Oh yeah.
and he is West Virginian through and through. And I think the only thing that takes precedence over West Virginia for him is United States Naval Aviator.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. We hope he's doing well. His son John stays in touch with us too, and John McBride there in the center with that handsome mustache. He's been a great supporter of the American Space Museum since its inception, and he's done, like you said, 2 decades as the chief astronaut out there for Delaware North.
Bringing the guys and the girls in and setting these presentations up. And yeah, he was just the what's the word? He was the grounding for our operation, if you will. He was the heartbeat of our operation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say pilot for, I want to say 51C, but
41G.
41G.
41
There
golf.
you go.
Yeah.
And scheduled to be a commander, and then Challenger happened.
And he ended up going to Washington, D.C., working as a NASA liaison to the Congress. And shortly after that time, he saw an opportunity to run for governor of West Virginia. So he left NASA and pursued that office, which regretfully he did not get, or when you talk to him now, it's just as good that he didn't.
Yeah.
But he told me, he said, one of the lousy things about politics is when you're running for office, you spend 85% of your time chasing money, looking for donations. And he said that wasn't fun.
Yeah. Jack Lousman said some of the same things.
Same thing,
he ran
yeah.
for in there. They thought they could do good for the people, and it's all about who can raise the most money, it seems, from time to time. Well, let's get to our astronaut wrangler here, Nick Thomas. Here's a beautiful man, the Guy Gardner.
Oh, yeah.
This is what you do out there. I just love seeing the faces light up and the kids and stuff out there. Nick, of course, is in the back at the astronaut signing at the gift shop, and the astronaut speaks at 11 o'clock at the gift shop, or at the
11 o'clock at the theater, and then at the theater again at 3:15 p.m.
And have an astronaut session, one at the gift shop and the other one underneath Atlantis there. So it's always fun. Guys, if you get a chance to see he's, in my mind, one of the exceptional shows that he does. He gets people involved, and he was a college teacher.
Oh, he's
right?
he's a he's a high school physics instructor. He's been the president of 3 different schools, so he believes very deeply in education, and not only talks the talk but walks the walk.
Yeah.
And you can see how well he gets along with the young people right here. And Guy's just one of our exceptional guys who can bring that story home to the people and make them feel in some ways that they've experienced a little bit of it themselves.
He does that, indeed. He's wonderful to watch. Well, we've got, let's get to GT11, Roman numeral 11, as you space geeks know it out there. Take it away, Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, Gemini 11 in 1966. Now, by this time, we'd pretty much done the things as far as long-duration spaceflight with Gemini 7 in particular, and now we're concentrating on rendezvous, docking, EVA, and also high altitude. On this flight, we actually scored an altitude using the Agena of about 850 miles above the Earth. That's so far been the highest Earth orbit mission in the American manned space program. We will surpass that with Artemis 2, where we will be a number of thousands of miles away from the Earth's surface before we do the swing around of the moon. But here we have our flight crew, Pete Conrad, our commander, on the right, making his second space flight, and one of his students from the Navy Test Pilot School at Pax River, that's Dick Gordon. It was during a get-together with the families that Pete Conrad's wife said that Dick had animal magnetism. And it quickly came to regret that, because after that, Pete Conrad kept calling him the animal, which he didn't like at all. But their mission, of course, was a combination of high-altitude operations, rendezvous and docking with the Agena, and then a spacewalk by Dick Gordon. And here we see the crew with the backup crew by the Gemini simulator. And of course, that's Pete and Dick seated, and standing above them from left to right, backup pilot Bill Anders and backup commander Neil Armstrong. Now, this pairing was partially as a result of the loss of Elliot C. and Charlie Bassett. All the assignments after that flight got scrambled, and suddenly Bill Anders found himself in the flow. When you were assigned to a backup crew, that was a good thing. The problem was that as a backup member, you would have to skip 2 missions before your actual first flight, and of course, there wasn't going to be a Gemini flight after the Gemini 12. So Bill was a little at loose ends, wondering where his career was going to end up after the Gemini. But of course, he was programmed into Apollo 8 and flew that magnificent orbital flight, first manned orbital flight around the moon with Frank Borman and Jim Lovell.
Bill Anders is the only 4 of these heroes still alive.
Bill Anders, a remarkable guy, went on to an incredible career after his time in the astronaut office, working, I think, first with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and then winding up with one of the contractors, and then becoming the president of that contracting team. He was able to accomplish a great deal in his life, and richly deserves that P-51 aircraft that he owns, which I hope he still owns, but that P-51, which he flew for many, many years as a private citizen.
And what did Dick Gordon and Pete Conrad go on to do?
After this flight, Pete and Dick both served on Apollo 12, landed on the moon, and Dick remained in the command module while Pete walked on the moon with Alan Bean. After that, Dick was in line to command Apollo 18, but then the controversy started about getting a geologist on the last flight, which was going to be Apollo 17. And it was either we put the geologist on 17, or we fly the geologist as planned on 18, which Dick would have commanded. Well, they ended up taking Jack Schmidt off of 18 and put him on 17. That left Dick without a flight. He retired from NASA, and for a while he served as president of the New Orleans Saints.
Oh, yeah. He had fun doing that, I'll bet.
Well, I know what he did have fun doing, and that was doing a reunion show with Pete and Al. You'd see it on YouTube, and it's years after the fact where they talk about Apollo 12, and they're just 3 pilots sitting around the table having fun talking about it.
On YouTube,
yeah.
Huh?
Right.
We'll Google that.
Right.
On there. Interestingly, too, the Navy pilots of Gordon, Conrad, and Bean were all super best friends.
Oh yeah,
and they were buried within sight of each other at Arlington Cemetery at the request of the families.
Yeah,
very cool. Well, let's get them launched. Let's get them fed and get them launched.
Yeah, here's the launch morning and breakfast with Pete and Dick, and of course the chief astronaut, Alan Shepard. A chance for a few, let's go over a few things sort of thing, and having your steak and eggs, and just basically a tradition that we followed all throughout the Gemini and Apollo program. We don't see it on the SpaceX flights. We don't see the crew in the dining room together. The first time we see them is in the suit-up room. Hopefully, when it comes up to Artemis 2, we'll see the crew in the dining room again, having breakfast together. That was a nice tradition. But there you see Chief Astronaut Alan Shepard going over a few last-minute things with Pete and Dick. Here's the docking with the Agena spacecraft. Always a beautiful sight. You've got the curvature of the Earth there to the lower right, and this incredibly super sharp, clear image of the Gemini nosing into the docking receptacle of the Agena rocket. They, of course, used this Agena later on. They fired up the engine and they boosted themselves up to that record altitude of 850 miles above the Earth. It was not always a sure proposition, because on Gemini 12, the circuitry to the engine failed, and they did not fire that up for a higher altitude record. So when you had the chance to execute one of these rocket firings, it was pretty amazing. You're facing the engine, and you're basically being thrown against the straps, what they call eyeballs out. And you can see the engine firing ahead of you. And that was a unique perspective for a pilot.
Yes, just a couple of them have experienced that. Yeah. They also made this docking in one orbit. That was important.
M equals 1. Yeah, that was
make that for the practice for the moon trip.
Yeah.
Ride 'em cowboy.
Yeah, ride 'em cowboy. Here's Dick Gordon, and he's astride the nose of the Gemini spacecraft, and he is attaching a tether from the Gemini to the Agena, because when they separated, they wanted to test the dynamics of a tether in microgravity. And it came out very unpleasantly, because as soon as they started backing away, the tether went into this looping motion. And by the time it was all deployed out, the tether was terribly looped. This kind of came back to haunt them on Apollo 15 because when they were going to retrieve the film canisters from the sim bay in the service module, the engineers wanted to rig up what they called the laundry line, 2 posts with a line in between, and reel those film cassettes back to the command module that way. Well, Al Worden told them right away, it's not going to work. He says, do you know what a tether does in zero gravity? He said, well, this is differently constructed, and we think it's going to be. So I tell you what, let's take it up on the zero G and on the Vomit Comet and test it out under the actual conditions, which they did. The tether immediately started rolling into a curl, and they realized, okay, yeah, that's not going to work. So what we'll do is we'll tether the film cassette to your wrist and then let you make your way back to the command module and do it that way, which they did. But yeah, this was kind of proof in the pudding that tether concept is a lot more complicated than people think.
I know you've researched and looked at all kinds of pictures that you can find. There's so few good pictures of these EVAs on Gemini.
Mm-hmm.
The GoPros have spoiled this generation, because they're putting these little tiny cameras on everything.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard to find some really good. There's some good videos, but the astronaut in the cabin in the spacecraft had more to do than just take pictures at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a low priority to get
absolutely.
good pictures there.
Right.
So some of you younger people wonder, gee, that's the best picture they got. Yep,
Yeah.
it is, because they were there. This was new stuff, all right.
We were lucky to get
And
this.
we were talking about that this Gemini 11 was the 17th crewed flight for America, and Russia had only flown five at the time.
5 times by this time.
So.
Yeah. Here's the Agena after undocking, and if you look closely, you can see the loop that has taken place in that line. This is after we've jettisoned the line, but the reason for the line on this particular mission was to extend the 2 vehicles as far apart as possible and to set them into a spin and see if we could generate artificial gravity in space, which we did. Only a partial G, but it proved the concept. But as you see, after we jettisoned the line, it had already terribly kinked up, and that gave the engineers a lot of reasons to scratch their heads because they had a lot of plans for tethers in zero gravity, but they simply didn't behave as well as they'd hoped they would.
The Gemini program, every 6 weeks, a manned flight of 2 men over 2 years, 65 and 66, just a tremendous program where we learn things. They even put inflatable balls out and chased them down and stuff like that. It was a lot of learning how all these systems
A lot of
work.
trial and error.
Yeah, a lot of trial and error. They weren't afraid to do things.
No, exactly.
They weren't averse. They weren't overthinking things, is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
Back then.
Here we are on the aircraft carrier coming off the helicopter. And this was actually the debut of giving the astronauts those ball caps when they got on the carrier. Now, they actually did give them later on. Before they left the ship, they were given these caps. But on this one, they made a show of giving them to them as soon as they came off the helicopter. And that particular tradition went all the way through the rest of Gemini and on through Apollo and all the way to ASTP and the Skylab programs. Be interesting to see if they resurrect this for the Artemis program. I hope so. I think it would be pretty cool.
Well, you're talking a lot of nostalgia stuff there. That we wishes, traditions and stuff.
Sure. Well,
I do too. I hope they get back some of
these
the
things were a team building exercise, and this was a salute to the crew, not only the crew of the recovery ship, but all members of the recovery team, because there were several other ships involved in this process, particularly in a contingency form. So this was a way to salute all those troops for their efforts, for all that time away from home they had to spend, and for the work they did to make this recovery a success.
Truly pioneering astronauts, like Nick said. Dick Gordon was orbiting the moon in November 1969, while Pete Conrad and his buddy Al Bean, who became a painter, were on the surface of the moon. Pinpoint landing, one of the most underrated achievements of the Apollo era, I think.
One of the big accomplishments of the early part of the lunar landing program was that ability to make a pinpoint landing, and hopefully that's going to be something that we exploit in the Artemis program. up on the South Pole.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to segue into the shuttle era, the shuttles of May. There were 11 of them. Orbiter Columbia or Challenger didn't fly in the month of September. 75 astronauts, and you've highlighted 4 or 5 of them here, including I'm going to be in, and you got some. He's got his personal scrapbook at the end, folks. Here, I love that part of it. So, Nick, here's STS 20. What we chose in the background here was STS. Which one is that from?
We're going for 26.
Yeah, we're going to start out with 26 there.
Yeah, 26 was our first flight after the loss of Challenger, a very important flight to everyone, especially important for myself in that this was the first flight that I supported out at the KSCVC by giving briefings to the general public on processing and flow operations and eventually the launch and the mission. So this was a very incredible time for all of us, and I can remember having been there before 26, and we were in the aftermath of STS 51L, and people were still coming to the visitors complex, and they were expressing their personal commitment to the program, saying, you know, guys, we're with you, God bless you, this is important, press on and keep the program alive. So it was a very important time for all of us because it was a morale building exercise for us as well as it was for the general public to see that we were back on track, we were planning this mission, and we were in fact returning to manned spaceflight. This is our crew for STS-26. Got our, on the right seated, we have Rick Houck, our commander. To the left, Dick Covey, our pilot. And from left to right in the back, we have Dave Hilmers, Pinky Nelson, George Pinky Nelson, and Mike Lounge. Dave Hilmers is currently a doctor. After he left the space program, he got his PhD in medicine, and he is a doctor now. Remarkable crew, and coming at a time when we really needed the positive reinforcement that we were back, we were well on our way back, and we were ready to accomplish this mission. So this crew recognized very closely their importance to the morale of NASA and to everyone in the team, because we're finally on our way back, and we wanted to see full enthusiasm among the team, which we certainly did.
1988, that was Bob Seek's first launch. He said every time he saw Pinky Nelson, the blonde spacewalker there in the back, he envisioned he had a surfboard underneath his arm there. He said he always looked like a kid going up with a surfboard there.
Surfer dude.
Yeah. And
here we are,
surfing in space.
Up on orbit. Now, the story behind those shirts is back in the orbiter processing facility in those days, it was a tradition to wear a Hawaiian shirt. In fact, our motto in the OPF was loud and proud. Okay. So one time the guys came through on a morale tour, looking at the vehicle and following the work in the OPF, and they were presented these Hawaiian shirts. And Rick said, thanks very much. And then Rick told the guys later on, said, we're going to wear these up on orbit to salute the OPF team, which they did. Now, regretfully, some anonymous bureaucrat in headquarters in D.C. did not like this, thought it was frivolous, thought it was just a little bit over the top. And an edict was issued saying that no more frivolous or non-mission necessary clothing would be worn on these flights. So if you fast forward to STS-29, you'll see the crew at breakfast, and they're wearing business suits, coats and ties. And that was Mike Coates' way of telling that guy in Washington, D.C. where his priorities belonged.
Yeah.
But this is the crew up on orbit with their Hawaiian shirts. And we're going to talk a little bit more about STS-26 a little later on in the program.
Nick, I want to just, before we move that, to go into your personal book at the end there. A lot of American people watching today don't understand how important this mission was. 2.5 years before this, our hearts were ripped out by the death of 7 astronauts in Challenger. And this was the return to flight. And this was this was very, very serious business here.
Yeah, we made several changes to the vehicle, notwithstanding the problem with the O-rings and the solid rocket boosters, but we made well over 1,000 changes to the vehicle itself because as Walt Cunningham said, when you came up to a delay in any kind of a developmental flight test program, one guy might raise his hand and say, I've got a problem with my system, I need more time to psych it out. Well, this is what Walt called raising the umbrella. This guy would put up the umbrella, and suddenly 10 other guys who had problems with their systems would jump under the umbrella and say, oh, I want to work on mine too. And this is not a bad thing. This gives you time to look at some of the things that you didn't have time for previously. And we were in such a rushed schedule before 51 now that these problems were developing, but the answer was, we'll get to that later. Well, now we had the stand down of it's over 2 years, and we had time to address these problems, such as the brakes on the orbiter. We had beryllium brakes. We changed them over to reinforced carbon-carbon. We changed the surface of the runway here at KSC. We made a number of changes in the vehicle, and this was going to be our opportunity to test those changes, and we certainly did, and accomplished that goal quite well.
Well, it was an amazing mission. Brave, these astronauts, Houck and Covey, Hall of Fame astronaut. All of them are in the Hall of Fame except Lounge, I think. Yeah, just wanted to reiterate that it was a very tense moment getting that bird off the pad, and you're going to see pictures of that Nick took here in a minute. One of the shuttles of the month of May or September is STS-47 in 1992.
First flight of the Japanese Space Lab in the payload bay of the orbiter, and very important mission, not only from the scientific aspect, but also the international cooperative aspect that we had here. And if we go to the crew, we'll see them. Let's see, in the center, in the back, we have our mission commander, Hoot Gibson, and Kurt Brown down below and to the right was our pilot. To the left of Kurt is Jay Apt. And then in the back row, we have Jan Davis, we have Mark Lee, and then after Hoot, we have Mae Jemison, who was the first female African-American to fly in space. And with them, Dr. Mamoru Mori, who was our Japanese mission specialist. And it was a very, very interesting flight. It was, again, a chance to roll that Space Lab module out and do those experiments in the back of the payload bay. And although on Earth you would think of that space as being fairly close, up in space, as you'll see, it's really somewhat roomy. And you see here in the next image everyone finding their space, and as these experiments are taking place. The efficiency of that setup was really, really remarkable. And I don't think I've ever heard of an astronaut who ever complained of a traffic jam on any of these missions, because you rehearse this out on the ground several times, and you basically know where everyone's supposed to be and when they're supposed to be there. So it was little or no confusion up there during actual orbit operations.
We'll be hearing from Micah Haddad, payloads operator, Wednesday on Stay Curious, who talked about how this was all configured for the missions in there. Quite interesting.
Here we have the conventional crew portrait on the inside the Space Lab, and of course everyone, big smiles, because you're working very hard, but who else gets to do their work under these conditions? Okay, you want to do an experiment on protein crystal growth. It's like, well, okay, but you're going to do it up in space in microgravity. Okay, I'm there. Yeah. Great. So it was a very productive crew, and all the experiments well scheduled, well laid out, I think well planned. Here we have Jan Davis in front of one of the protein crystal experiments. And this is very important, very close to her heart, a specialty of hers. And the idea that you can grow these perfect crystals in microgravity. A protein crystal is important because if you can understand the shape of that crystal, you can basically design your medicine, which serves as a key where the disease serves as the lock. So you can cut that key to fit that lock and have its maximum effect on the disease you're talking about. And more importantly, too, these perfectly grown crystals were not disturbed by gravity. There's no striation, no stratification. They grew quite evenly and quite well. So a lot of positive things that came out of this research on board Space Lab and other missions that flew protein crystal growth experiments.
Well, the year before STS-47 in 1992, out of sequence, they flew STS-48 there. And there's a familiar name to everybody on the Space Coast, one of our favorite astronauts, Sam Gemar.
48 was a flight of the URS, the Upper Atmosphere Research Satellite. The mission commanded by J.O. Creighton, a Navy test pilot and fighter pilot, Vietnam veteran. And along with him, Kenny Reitler, to the right of J.O., was the pilot for the mission. To the left of J.O. is Mark Brown. And up on top, we have Sam Gamar and Jim Buckley. Sam Gamar, as you mentioned earlier, has been with us on Astronaut Encounter many times, as has J.O. Creighton. And Sam has what you'd call a unique sense of humor. One time he was on stage and he was asked by a member of the audience which movie made by Hollywood was the most accurate as far as the space program is concerned. And Sammy thought about it and he said, Spaceballs by Mel Brooks. So
that's good for him.
That's Sammy's humor.
Yeah, that sounds
They were a very tight crew, and of course, deploying that UR's Upper Atmospheric Research Satellite was going to require that 50-foot long robot arm. We'll see the crew coming out of the O&C building in the next image in those what we call pumpkin suits. And these suits were designed to allow the astronaut to survive not only a high-speed, high-altitude bailout, but also, more than likely, you're going to be dumped in the ocean, possibly the Atlantic, which is very, very cold. So you got a lot of thermal protection in that suit. And inside, it's almost like a skin diving suit, like a underwater suit, the rubber suit they wear. And it came with a neck dam that you'd roll up and would keep all that water out, keep you from sinking. So you had to swim in that suit in the JSC pool. You had to swim in that suit, inflate your raft, get into the raft, and shoot your emergency procedures after that. But again, this is the crew coming out on launch day, and that was a favorite picture of J.O.'s because he mentioned the fact that there's no tension, there's no worry on those faces. They're all ready to go, looking forward to the mission. Sam Gamar talks about the night before the mission, where you're kind of alone with your thoughts and you have a chance to reflect on some of the things that might go wrong. But in the morning, you wake up and you're a different person. You're just mission focused and you're ready to go in that vehicle. And the only worry you have is that someone might stop the countdown.
There you go. Like what Charlie Walker, astronaut, has said on your stage, that he died 100 times.
Yeah.
In simulations.
Yeah.
So he didn't have a bit nervousness. He just treated it all like a big sim.
And one of the guys heard the countdown briefing at the T-9 hold, and the launch director was saying, now, if you see anything that looks funny, raise your hand, call a halt, and we'll stop the whole thing. And this astronaut was saying, no, don't tell them that. Let them go. Let's get out of here. And Wendy Lawrence's philosophy on launch day, after you've been on your back for the better part of 3 hours, her philosophy was launch me or let me out.
Yeah.
Here we see the deploy of the URs, the Upper Atmosphere Research Satellite, and that mission was specifically to look at the ozone layer of our atmosphere to see what was happening with it. You remember back at that time there was a lot of concern about what they call CFCs, or chlorofluorocarbons, that might be disturbing the ozone layer. And so this satellite went a long way toward looking at that problem. And what we came to realize was that the ozone hole, if you want to call it that, the ozone hole was seasonal. In one part of the year, during the summer perhaps, it would expand. During the winter, it would contract. So we took a lot of data in from the URs and had a better understanding of what makes this ozone hole what it is.
1991, laying the template for today's global warming issues. This is the data harvested in the 90s by the shuttle that they use for these things now. But great mission, great crew. Now we're going to look at
51.
STS-51.
STS-51, they deployed an advanced communications satellite and also the Orpheus SPAS payload, again using the robot arm. And we go to our crew and we'll see our mission commander, Frank Culbertson, there on the far left. And his pilot, Bill Reedy, who is on second from the right. And Carl Walsh, where is Carl? He's in the center, seated in the center. Dan Birch to the left of Carl. And finally, Jim Newman standing on the far right.
Yeah, far right, spacewalker.
This crew I have a personal affinity for because several weeks after their mission, they came to KSC to give a public briefing. And we did not have Astronaut Encounter at that time. We didn't have the office. We didn't even have the concept. But these guys were going to come and speak to the public over at IMAX 1, tell them about the mission, and show their films and so on. So it was my job to meet them at the van, get them over to the theater, and then get them out back to the van afterwards. Well, that morning, before I went to work, I flew my certification flight to get my airman certificate with the FAA instructor. He gave me my ticket, and I was a full-fledged airman. So that morning, when I met the crew, I told them what had happened, and I handed out cigars to celebrate. And one of my friends said, let me get this straight. These guys flew in space. You flew a Cessna, and you're handing out cigars? I said, yeah, because they've all been through the same thing. That first flight, getting the ticket, getting the solo, and so forth. So I said, it's a pilot thing.
Yeah.
And they understood it. And they understood and appreciated that. So that was a fun moment that I had with the 51 crew.
They cut the shirt off of you too, right?
Yeah, at the
hanging
airport.
up there?
Well, they not only did that, but they said, "Oh, we got to take your solo. You got to take your picture." So they set me up there for a picture, and little did I know it, but there was a guy with a big bucket of ice water behind me. And as soon as the picture snapped, they dumped the water on me, and that picture used to be up on the wall of the FBO, which is gone now.
Huh. You still a private pilot?
No, I flew back in the 90s, but no, I'm no longer in the seat. But once always, once a pilot, always a pilot.
That's right.
It's really a life-changing thing. And I was talking to a pilot in the ready room one time, and he asked me, he says, "Do you have your instrument rating?" I said, "No, I'm just a VFR pilot." He said, "No, there's no such thing as just a pilot. We are all pilots."
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the philosophy I took with me on that morning of the with the 51 crew.
By the way, the 51 crew, 49 and 47, all launched on the same day, September 12th, 1 year apart. 91, 92, and 93. I think that's kind of cool. Let's look at some of those images here. This Newman is a fabulous visitor that you have out there. I really enjoy him when he's out there. He's hanging 10 on a spacewalk.
Here we have the EVA going on right now. Newman and Waltz outside, and they are practicing procedures that will be necessary for the construction of the International Space Station. And these EVAs, these practice EVAs, looked innocuous enough, but they were very, very important as to the eventual success that we had with EVA operations on station assembly. We had a lot of things. We had a couple of things go wrong where the crew had to take immediate action, but they were prepared for it thanks to missions like this. Here we are on the middeck, brushing our teeth. Dan Birch on the left and Frank Culbertson on the right. And of course, the joke is who's upside down. The answer is nobody's upside down. Yeah. But this is just a day in the life. In the morning, you get up and you brush your teeth and you wash your face and you have breakfast and you make your way on to the first task of the day. And here's another hurricane from space, and they may look similar, but they are all magnificent. You can see the rotation of this hurricane on the Earth. And it is, again, so remarkable that something so beautiful from space can be so deadly and so frightening down on the Earth. But again, this picture is a reminder that the Earth is going to be the Earth, and things are going to happen weather-wise. There's not a damn thing you can do about it.
That's right.
So we're a little arrogant to think we can change any of this. We just got to get our heads a little more humble and realize that, and sometimes we are at the mercy of the Earth and the elements, and we better deal with it.
And we're going to STS-69, launched September 7th, 1995.
Yeah, deploy of the Wake Shield facility. This was the second time they deployed Wake Shield, and they also deployed and retrieved a payload known as the Spartan 201. Jim Voss and Mike Gernhardt also performed an EVA on this flight. And here we have crew. In the front to the right, we have our commander, Dave Walker, variously known as Red Flash. And to the left is our pilot, Ken Cockrell. And up on top, we got Mike Gernhardt, one of our EVA guys. Jim Newman in the center, our robot arm guy. And then finally, we've got Jim Voss, on the right. Voss and Gernhardt in their EVA suits. Gernhardt was a particularly strong choice for this job because he was also a high-end scuba diver. And he came up with a lot of good ideas for the office, the EVA office, particularly in pre-breathing and preparation for a spacewalk. So he made a lot of contributions in that area.
Now, Newman was on 51 and did a spacewalk in 93, but he was an arm operator on this one
Right.
in 1995.
And here is the, I think this is, I'm trying to,
That's
you know,
the Sparta,
the
yes.
spas.
Yeah.
No, excuse me, that is a wake shield. That's WSF.
There's the wake.
And that's a wake shield facility.
All right, we'll go back.
And here's, okay,
Is
there's
that wake shield?
post-deploy.
Okay.
And then after that, we got a picture of Dave Walker on the aft flight deck flying the rendezvous back to Wake Shield. And Jim Newman going to reach
Love
out
the
with that
earth in
robot
those
arm.
two panels. There.
Yeah, it gives you an idea as to the great view you had between the aft and the overhead windows. You could position yourself over those windows in such a way that the overhead windows were at your feet, and it was like flying in a glass bottom boat.
I love looking at the things around.
Yeah.
Like all the Velcro. Look at all the yellow tabs
All
of
the
Velcro
wires and all the
everywhere.
different cameras and different systems that were necessary.
Yeah.
And of course, all that stuff's got to be packed away on landing day. And there's the recapture of the Wake Shield facility. They did not get as much of the data as they had hoped for on these two flights of WSF, but they did prove that growing these micro-size films in the microgravity environment using the wake shield, using the wake of this device to make them very thin but very well constructed. But I think in the end it was probably too much for too little return.
Still one of these scientific things that they tried out there to learn from it, and then they improved upon it, sort of like the tethered satellite system that there was a couple times they tried that on there, and there's a beautiful
There'd be Jim Voss
spacewalker.
on one of the spacewalks there. I believe he's there at the on the end of the robot arm. And again, these EVAs were all very important. We talked at the Shuttle Fest about the long-lasting effects of the space shuttle program. And in my view, the greatest accomplishment was the way the science of EVA had been advanced and had been perfected. We were doing things in the beginning of the space shuttle program with EVA, which were very simple, simply running up and down the laundron of the payload bay with a tether and making sure the suit worked properly, to the point where later on we were building an international space station with those EVAs. And we'll continue to see progress made in the EVA area, not only walking outside the spacecraft, but walking on the surface of the moon. Very anxious to see how those new suits are going to perform on the moon, but we can look forward to more advances in EVA with the Artemis program.
Absolutely, it's to make it look easy. We've got a question for Mr. Nick Thomas here. Go ahead on the UCX family microphone, Marty.
You got a question from I'm sorry, from Carlton Bailey. I can't remember the crew, and it may have been before your time, pretty sure pre-51L, but I remember two crews at the visitor center set up outside after a launch giving an overview of their flight. Any knowledge or of the history of that?
Yeah, one of those crews was Hoop Gibson's crew on the flight which first flew the manned maneuvering unit, because they were the first flight to land in Florida. And we made arrangements after their landing to come out to the Rocket Garden and do a public presentation out there, which is very exciting. 41, I don't know what the letter was, but it was a 41 mission that first flew the main maneuvering unit.
Yeah, that'd been B, 41B,
Yeah, 41.
Advanced Brand, Gibson, Stewart, McNair, McCandless.
And our spacewalkers
February 84.
were Bruce McCandless and Bob Stewart. And Bruce McCandless had that beautiful picture taken of him floating away from the payload bay. But that was one crew that certainly came back did a post-flight presentation pre-51L.
I'd like to meet Stewart. Nobody remembers the second person to do anything, and
Uh-huh.
he did the second man maneuvering unit there. So, we got 5 shuttles there that you reviewed there a little bit with us, and then now we got a personal segment here, folks, and check out who is this young fella there.
Well, this is back in 1988. This is at the rollover for Discovery for STS-26, first flight post Challenger. And there were four distinct points in a shuttle process flow operation here at KSC. You had the rollover from the orbital processing facility to the vehicle assembly building. Then you had the rollout from the VAB out to the launch pad. About a week, 11 days, 2 weeks or so before the flight, you had the terminal countdown demonstration test, full dress rehearsal with the crew and all the elements of the flight team, and then finally the launch. So I've been privileged to meet a number of the people in the public affairs office, such as Carol Cavanaugh, Bruce Buckingham, Manny Verrata, Dick Young, and of course our friend
Mr. Hugh
Harris. Yeah. So they were convinced when they realized what it was I was doing for a living out there, which was briefing the public on processing, flow, and flight operations. They figured, well, it'd make a lot of sense for that guy to actually see these events take place. So I was given permission to attend these events with the press, and there was not a single time I did it that I didn't appreciate where I was and what I was doing, because about 2 years before this picture, I had the worst job in my life, tending bar in Daytona Beach. And now here I am at the top of Mount Olympus, and it's just been that great all these years later. So if the smile on my face looks pretty big, that's why. Now, the other special part about this picture was that as the vehicle was rolled out, we all took our pictures. They stopped the vehicle to give us a chance to get good pictures like that. And then after they took their pictures, all the photographers would patch their cameras back and forth, get pictures of themselves from the audience. I said, well, I'll do the same thing. And there was a photographer standing next to me, and I don't know if I asked him or he offered, but it was Carlton Bailey.
Oh, was it?
Carlton Bailey took this picture. This is where we met at rollout for STS-26. And Carlton took this picture. And later on took some other very nice pictures out there at the pad. And this is where Carlton and I first met. And it was, we'd see each other at each one of these events and trade stories, trade pictures, and so forth. So this is where it all starts with.
Yes, I love that. I talked to Carlton a couple hours ago for the show on there.
And Carlton, don't forget, this was 1988, so we were all looking a little younger back then.
Looking younger, looking good, looking tan there. So this is really one of your first, I mean, you are flush full of a new job. Yeah. You are like I am here at the American Space Museum. I can't believe I'm doing this because I love this all my life. Yeah. And seeing one of the most historic return to flights.
Yeah, this is where about to turn the corner and go into the transfer aisle of the vehicle assembly building. And when you're watching these events, you're with these vehicles, you're quite literally, you are in the presence of these vehicles, and they put out an aura which is undescribable. But when you're there and when you're experiencing this, either for the first time or the 100th time, it's always very special. You always appreciate it. It just always makes an impression, and it's a nice memory to be carrying with you. Although we have Atlantis over at the Visitor Center, I'd say that Discovery is probably my spirit orbiter, because she was the first one I saw live. She flew the recovery flight after Challenger. She flew the recovery flight after Columbia. And so Discovery has a very special part in my heart. And got a lot of good memories surrounding her.
Have you been to Udvar Hazy and seen her there?
No, I haven't seen her there. I know she's sitting there on her landing gear in the landing configuration. But after you've experienced Atlantis at the Kennedy Space Center,
you've seen it.
There's no way to top that.
You don't want to see it in a cage, so to speak. But she is beautiful, and I have not seen Endeavor yet. When I go to California, when they re-erect it, I'll do that. But it's just amazing. Nice way to say things there, Nick, about how you're in the presence of these things. Now
we rolled out to the.
All these pictures are your photographs.
Right, I'm taking all these. Right. We rolled out to the launch pad on July 4th, 1988. We had a big celebration out at the vehicle assembly building. Our center director at the time was the General Forrest McCarthy, and he came out and made a speech. And also there we had the mission management chairman, Bob Crippen, and Ken Cameron was out there too. That's where I first met Ken Cameron. That's where I first met Cripp.
Wow, you go back that far with
yeah,
Cameron. You just
yeah.
introduced him today.
Cameron was a rookie astronaut on this at this time.
Huh.
But here we have the vehicle going out to the launch pad, and you can take picture after picture. And of course, this time I'm still shooting film, so you can see that in the quality of the picture. But the vehicle gets to a certain area, and you take a picture, and you figure, okay, that's about it. That's as good as it gets. So I'd turn to walk back to my car, and then I'd stop, and I'd turn around, and I'd look at the vehicle again. And then after about 3 minutes, I'd head back to the car, and then I'd stop, and I'd turn around. And I did this about 4 or 5 times, and finally I said to myself, one of us has to let go. And I don't think there's a time that I haven't felt that for any vehicle rollout or transport. It's just a magical experience, and it is a presence of that vehicle that is quite beyond description.
Well, you described it really well there.
Here we are out at the pad, got the rotating system structure open there, and we're getting ready for what's called the FRR, the FRR, flight readiness firing. And what we're going to do is we're going to fire those engines up for a full 22 seconds, and we're going to test all the changes that we made to the engines, to the plumbing, in the wake of 51L. And so henceforth, that's why we had this engine firing. And here we are. I'm about a mile from the vehicle. Carlton Bailey's out there also. And I'm about a mile away from the vehicle with these other photographers and reporters. And this vehicle, again, has such a presence that when those engines fire, it's as if the vehicle picks you up in the hollow of its hand, and it gently shakes you, and 22 seconds later, she gently sets you back down on the ground. I don't mean to see your feet leave the ground, but you do feel that vibration through your body, and it is just awe-inspiring, and it's breathtaking to realize that you're only experiencing 25% of the power of this vehicle. The rest of it are in those solid rocket boosters.
Yeah.
And from there, you probably wouldn't survive. Your hearing certainly wouldn't.
22 seconds. That's
Yeah.
kind of a long, really.
That's a long
awesome.
firing, yeah, but that's what we clocked at, 22 seconds. And they came back, and we heard days later that the engineers were doing handsprings over all the data that came back from this firing. So it was very successful, and it was a great thing to be able to experience.
The sound of it winding down the metals and what that could you hear all that? I mean, you remember
I can't recall the sound of the engine spooling down or spooling up. I just remember that growing rumble as the engines ignited, and the way that rumble died away slowly after the engine shut down.
All right, then saw some astronauts.
This is another major milestone of pre-launch activities. This is the terminal countdown demonstration test, and it's a 2-day long event. Now, on the first day, you as a crew will do a safety walk down to the launch pad, being checked out on the slide wire baskets, the methods that you'll use once the basket gets down to the ground, and make your way over to the bunker. And this is the crew making their way over to the bunker after being briefed on the slide wire basket operations on the ground. And once you got to the ground, after the safety net caught you, you stand up and you pull a D-ring, which would drop the side curtain of the basket, grab the bar, alley-oop out of the basket, and make your way over to the bunker or to the M113 armored personnel carrier, depending upon the nature of the problem at the pad and how quickly you might have to get out of Dodge. So it would be a mode 1 or a mode 2 or maybe even a mode 3 egress exercise that we do on that day. And one of our friends who was one of the support crew on 26, she might have even been the Cape Crusader for 26, that's Kathy Thornton. And this is in the midst of all these operations going on. So that was when I first met KT out at the TCDT for 26.
Well, we know she's wonderful. We have her blue flight suit
blue
in our
flight suit
women's gallery there.
Right there in the gallery.
Her birthday's August 17th, and she was speaking out there. We had a good time with her birthday. Got her a cake and all. She's a fun lady, smart lady. She spent 20 years as a professor.
Yeah.
At the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, where Launch Director Bob Seek also graduated from.
Now, on the second day of terminal countdown demonstration tests, we went out to the pad to meet the crew as they came out in the bus to go up to the vehicle. And basically, on second day of TCDT, you ran the countdown. down to about T-minus 32 seconds, where we'd have the handover from the ground launch sequencer to the onboard computers, and that's where we stopped the sim. But this was a view coming around the back side of the pad, which surprised me because I didn't think we'd be taking that route. But we came up to the back side of the pad, I took this picture, and then we made our way around to the front of the pad to watch the crew arrive in the transport van.
Yeah, these are your own photographs
Right.
taken there on film back in the day. What kind of camera did you have?
Using a Pentax.
Pentax.
And I would be,
Love Pentax cameras.
yeah, here we have Rick Halk and Dick Covey coming out of the Astro van, heading to the elevator. I mentioned before that Carlton Bailey was certainly out here for this one. I'm not sure because we had the choice of either covering the walkout at the ONC building or the arrival at the pad. I can't recall which Carlton may have experienced, but I'd certainly be interested in his experiences on this day.
Oh, he'll share them with
Yeah,
us.
oh, yeah.
No doubt about that.
Yeah,
You'll be hearing
absolutely.
about him when he's out there
Yeah.
getting an autograph. What occurred to me here, you may have mentioned it, but this is, of course, after 51L 26. The pumpkin suits, which I know you talked about, it's the first time they wore them.
Right.
The outside of the first 4 missions, test missions, they had a different flight suit on, but everybody else just kind of wore a casual.
You wore a conventional Nomex flight suit.
Yeah.
And you had a survival vest, and you had a helmet, which was a clamshell helmet, which you opened up, you put your face into it, and then you closed the back and screwed it down. No protection at all, in fact, for decompression of the cabin. But this is what we considered with these pumpkin suits. Now, the original version of these suits were actually blue, but then, thank God, I think the Coast Guard chimed in and said, "What are you trying to do? Hide from us?
Yeah,
You
right.
don't wear blue in the ocean. You wear orange." And so the
That's why I'm emphasizing this. Though it's a common sight to us now.
Right.
This is the first time
This was
press,
novel.
American
This was the first
public
time.
saw these
And
orange
speaking
suits.
for myself, I was glad to see astronauts in neck rings again.
Oh yeah,
That's just the way you did things.
yeah. Well, you'll see them holding them out like there because it's really a tight neck ring there when they're hanging around there. So
This is a fly out at the shuttle landing facility after terminal countdown demonstration test. And there we see Dave Hilmers on the extreme right, Rick Halk at the microphone, and behind them Dick Covey and Mike Lounge. Pinky is hovering off to the left. I just didn't have the lens to handle this, I guess. But they're
too much
saying,
lens.
They're saying farewell to the press and thanking them for their support for being out here and acknowledging the importance of this flight and basically the importance of covering this flight to let the American people know that we were back in space. And as Barbara Morgan said, it was important, especially for the young people, to see how we reacted to all this. When a failure comes up, are we going to press on, or are we just going to pull the bar tent and sneak away? Well, we decided to press on, and it was important for the public to be aware of that fact. And so that's what things like this serve, to remind the public that we were back, we were confident, and we were ready to fly again.
Do you remember how big the press corps was, and was there a lot of international
We
people?
had a lot of photographers. I think we had more photographers than, quote, reporters. And I'd say the total cast that day, a busload of people, we probably had about 50 or 60 people out there for this event.
So, and then, of course, it would taper off after the drama of the
Yeah.
next one comes down there.
Here we are flying out, and I love this picture because we had a 5-member crew. So that meant we still needed 3 T-38s, but we needed an extra pilot. So the pilot for this mission in the back seat is Pinky Nelson, and the front seat is Bob Crippen. He's the chairman of the mission management team at this time, but he retained his privileges to fly a T-38, and I think rightfully so. And Cripp flew Pinky out on this flight back to Ellington in Houston.
That's a cool picture. And of course, so Bob just turned 86 years old last month, so doing well.
Here we are on launch day.
Beautiful launch shot
Now,
there. I love the clouds and everything.
This was taken from the roof of the IMAX theater.
Oh,
And those of us who worked over there had planned this for several months before launch, but of course we kept it to ourselves. So on launch day, we made our way up to the roof of the VAB. We got these beautiful pictures of the vehicle heading uphill. And then, not so surprisingly, for the next launch, we went to that trap door in the roof, and it was padlocked. They were onto us.
no.
But we got our chance. We got our great pictures. We got our great launch day pictures. As you see, we've moved into the roll and pitch program. heading uphill, and it's
I-
startling to realize that that flame plume is probably 100 times longer than the vehicle sitting at its apex. And you
Yeah.
realize, we especially realized on that flight that we had 5 souls on the tip of that flame. When SRB SEP came up, we were of course very, very glad. But those of us who studied this program for a long time realize that it's really not over until you get up on orbit. Hell, it's not really over until we'll stop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Nick, that's a beautiful picture. Marty, we've seen a lot of pictures there. I really love that one. That's got some nice tone to it and stuff
Very
like that.
good, very unique memory for,
Yeah,
And again, heading
punching through the
uphill, getting
clouds.
further and further away at that 28.5-degree orbital inclination. And absolutely, your heart was just swelling with pride. And also, you had a few prayers going on there for the safety of the flight crew. But mostly, it was a sense for us, a sense of exhilaration, a sense of closing the circle, of getting ourselves back into flight again, and also remembering that this flight was going to be the ultimate tribute to the crew of 51L, that we were back in space and we were back to stay.
And you had 109 flights ahead of you after this.
Yeah,
Think
it
about
just,
that,
yeah,
Ray.
but at this time we're taking them one flight at a time, and I can tell you that those first 5 flights after 26 were very important to me, all the way up through the deploy the Hubble Space Telescope. After that, I've been transferred to a semi-management position, the lead for the Information Education Department. So I spent more time in the office than in the field, but still stayed close to all of these missions as they flew. And if any of these events ever took place on my day off, I was out there to cover them.
There you go. We're glad Doug Forrest is watching today. You've seen his beautiful pencil drawings that we've had the astronauts sign. Robert Law's up in Dundee, Scotland. Cynthia Rossi, she's a big fan of Nick Thomas here, out there getting autographs. Dave Stangy's up there in Michigan. Carlton Bailey.
Good.
Bill Whiting is up there. Did Bill go back to Michigan, Marty? Yep, he had to go back up to Michigan. Gary Gerald is our farmer up there in Collins, Georgia. Gary actually did a program about farming. It was really cool. Neil 1030's watching. Space Monkey. Tom Celentano. Save some money there for our October 7th auction there, Tom. I know you always participate. And my astronomy friend Cliff Watson in Pomona. Australia is glad that spring has sprung down there. Where we've got fall going on here.
Wanted to say a quick hello to some of our friends, Tammy and Bill, who are longtime viewers of the show and fellow rocket enthusiasts, space enthusiasts, and some of our other friends out there, including Terry Wilcott and Bruce Melnick. Let's see, Wendy Lawrence, Barbara Morgan, and others in the AE office. We hope you're with us, and we hope you're enjoying the show.
Yep, thank you very much. And like I tell them, Nick, if they don't enjoy the show, don't tell anybody, okay? All right, but we're sure you enjoy this as we always do. We could just bring Nick in here, sit him down, and you'd be entertained for an hour without any props. But let's get the STS-26 back on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
There's
This is the coming home ceremony. This was several weeks after the mission, and the crew came back to Kennedy Space Center and had a public event. And as you can see here, they were very, very exuberant. There were a lot of high fives and low fives and side fives and back fives, and just a very celebratory mood, as much not just for the crew but for the team here at Kennedy Space Center. When I took this picture of Pinky, I realized as I was taking the picture that he was getting a lot of shout out from the females out there in the crowd.
Oh, I bet
so
you,
he
yeah.
threw his hands up, hello fans, that kind of thing. So it was a great day. It was a wonderful moment for us working at Kennedy Space Center, again closing that circle and bringing the crew home. Now Rick here at the podium has a book, and this was a signature book that was passed out to all the members of the team at KSC, contractors included, and also came over to the visitors complex. Now, if you look below and to the left in that last picture,
yeah, see,
below and to the left, you got
Bill.
Bill Nelson, who is our NASA administrator now, and to his left, Bob Seek.
Yeah, it looks like C.
Bob was the launch director, of course. And this was being returned to all of us here at KSC to be put on display. Now, we put this on display in the old Launch Status Center for many years. And there's the cover of the book. What was amazing was about 2 years ago, I found a copy of this book, a copy of the actual book, in one of the antique stores, because replicas of this book had been passed out to all the members, contractor members, and so forth. And so I saw this at the antique store, and I immediately bought it. And sure enough, on page 88, on the left row, six from the bottom, there's my signature there. So that's my signature that flew in space on STS-26. It's a very that was a nice moment for me to have, by proxy, taken a little bit of a presence on board the vehicle. And again, for all of us who got to sign that book, it was a very special flight and a very special feeling to be a part, even just a small part, of our recovery and our return to space flight.
So they flew the original of this up in space, because
Right.
I've seen copies of this. So Marty, do you remember signing that as your launch process services?
Yeah, I vaguely remember signing it. I'm sure I did.
Well, now I'm going to have to bring my replica over. And you have to go through 90 pages and try to find your signature.
do that.
We can do that. We
I'll
can make
find
that
it.
happen.
Yeah, we've probably got some in our storage somewhere. But yeah, and this just shows people how bonded the space workers were. This is an extraordinary chapter of American history.
This is a team effort like no other. I would dare you to find any other occupation that has the team spirit and the commitment that spaceflight has. It is one large team effort, and you realize that your success is attached to the success of others. So it's a very tight feeling, and it's a unique feeling. And as I say, outside the military, I don't think you'll find any other occupation that has the cooperative nature, the team spirit, and the enthusiasm that you find in the American space program.
And the attitude of here's how we can, not why we can't.
Yeah, exactly right.
And you got to solve these problems in outer space on Earth. So, Nick Thomas, thank you very much for a great program today. We know everybody enjoyed it out there. Marty, thank you for a good Streamlabs production program. Anything to tie up over there? Any loose ends?
Nope, we're good to go.
Great. Well, we've got Wednesday, we got Mikey Haddad's going to talk about payloads. We're going to talk about the SLA, the science radar that was so important, going several flights of that. And Friday, we're going to talk with an expert, Dr. Gary Studi, about eating plants in space, growing them and eating them. Yeah. Gary has grown plants in space for 20 years, and he said last year they finally let him eat something in space. They always want to bring it back and analyze it, but
they were having trouble on the space station growing these tomatoes up there, and the people who work over the labs here at KSC Visitors Complex were actually asked to participate in trying to find the solution to this problem. And so they ended up growing these little tomatoes about that big, and our NASA liaison at the time was a fellow by the name of Tim Ferriss. So they called them Tiny Tim tomatoes. And I had a chance to try one of them, and boy, they were good.
They were good, huh? Little tomato. All right. Well, I'm going to ask Gary Studi about that. Dr. Studi will be here Friday, Mikey Haddad Wednesday, and we'll do Shuttles of the Month and Little Astronomy on Tuesday and Thursday. Nick, thank you so much for another wonderful program.
Thanks very much.
And we appreciate all your great stories, and also how you're promoting the American Space Museum here in downtown Titusville. So, folks, until tomorrow, we hope that you find it in your heart to watch our show. Go to our website, see what's going on there. We're trying to raise a fundraising campaign that's going to kick off November 1st. So if you find it in your heart to help our nonprofit, you can do so on Facebook or on our YouTube channel here. So until tomorrow, I'm Mark Marquette saying we can't wait to see you again to bridge the space between us.